The Marino Show. Hey, everybody, welcome to The Marino Show. I'm your host, David Marino. I'm so excited to welcome back my guest today. Blake Best is an award-winning horror author. He has a new book that he's working on called Bad Dreams, Untold Tales from Elm Street. And exciting news, he has a film that he's working on, Blake's Krazy Nightmare. And before I get to him, I also have to mention these other books that he's written that I love. One of them being Razor's Edge, which is an origin novel, the Nightmare on Elm Street film series. And then he did this one called Behind the Screams, which is a Dream Masters Revealed is the title. It's all the behind the scenes stories that you want to know about Nightmare on Elm Street Part 4. Blake, I'm so happy to have you back. You know I love horror, and you are like the horror king. Thank you for being back on the show.
Well, thank you very much. Those are kind words. I don't know if I can live up to that much hype, but I'm glad to be back. It's nice to see you.
It's good to see you too. You know, I keep up with you, and since our last interview, I've read, several of your books. You've sent me some. You're really a great writer, and I love your passion for the Nightmare on Elm Street film series. Now, you do more than books around that series, but let's talk about what's going on right now, because the big thing is Blake's Krazy Nightmare, a movie that you're working on. Tell me what you can about it at this point.
So I was approached about this project by someone who I worked with on another film. He actually is responsible for my casting in He Comes to Kill, where I played Blake the Guard. Apparently, it's become so much that I don't even have to have a fake name anymore. They just give me roles with my given name. So I worked with him on that project, and then he is the creative force behind DarkHouse Entertainment. So that's a new company that's sort of breaking new ground with darker horror. They're very much in the vein of lots of practical effects, lots of dark horror, lots of very shadowy things, darker lighting. So everything you love about those 80s and 90s horror films, no CGI, lots of practical effects. And that's sort of what got me hooked. Was I feel like there's such an overabundance of CGI going on, and that's fine to an extent, but I like to see stuff happen in front of me. Probably one of my favorites outside of Nightmare on Elm Street is The Howling, an American Werewolf in London. I love seeing those on-screen transformations, like the fingers and the claws and like the reaction shots. It's just, that's the kind of stuff that we like. So he basically is doing this movie about my involvement with the Nightmare on Elm Street mythology, and I'm in the process in the film. People have been clamoring and emailing me and showing up at cons like, you need to write another Elm Street book. So finally I decided to relent, and I want to tell a story that's not been told before from the point of view of a new generation who are finding out that the town they live in, Springwood, Ohio, has got big secrets, and bad things once happened there, and now they're starting to happen again, and they're trying to figure out why. And in the process, it's an all new set of characters, but there are a couple that are returning. Obviously, Freddy returns, and so I have to write this book. But at first, I feel like I'm too close. Like, I feel like I'm sort of in Freddy's mind, and that's not a place I want to be. And then it spreads, and he starts threatening me in my dreams, like he's showing up, and in the film I worked on the actual Nightmare on Elm Street films, and I've got a long and arduous history with the project, and getting involved again with it. I start having these bad dreams, right? And then he comes to me and basically he says, if you don't write what I want you to write, then everyone around you is going to die, including you. So you need to tell this story because I can't tell it. So in the process of all that, it drives me nuts. I'm not sleeping. I'm drinking caffeine like it's water. Not sleeping at all. Smoking cigarettes and just doing anything I can to stay awake. And finally, I enroll in group therapy. I see a Dr. Roberts, who is supposed to try to help me. She is sort of a pioneer in sleep disorders and working through dream therapy. And she thinks that it's the work being involved. You're working too hard, this, that, and the other. And I'm telling her that's not what it is. This isn't normal. And then bad things start to happen and something has to be done. So I have to do what I'm told or everyone around me is going to suffer, and that's the gist of what I can give you. There's an Indiegogo campaign being launched, and of course, it's being put together and organized by DarkHouse Entertainment. The Indiegogo, its mission statement is the funds are going to be used for things involved with filming, lighting, and then new camera equipment. We've already got some great camera equipment, but we want it to be top of the line and to give the best quality and representation because so much has already been done. Like, there have already been a handful of shooting locations locked down. Our special effects makeup artist has already been hired and started preliminary working on the makeup. The cast is already taken care of. Music is taken care of. Promotion is quite a bit taken care of. There's already everything from posters to drink coasters and all kinds of neat stuff that's already related to the project. And so much has already been done. So this last little bit, for the campaign is going to go towards the camera stuff and things like that and the lighting. And also, Dark House wants to back the book that I'm writing, which is going to be featured in the film. It's supposed to be the book that I'm working on. It's called Bad Dreams, Untold Tales from Elm Street. So it's actually a tie-in in a way to the film. So they're wanting to back that and actually mass produce copies of that book because I was originally going to just do a limited run, like 100 or something. And that's why I've been having people pre-order because my publisher, every time they do something with Nightmare on Elm Street or with a property like that, there's risk involved. And with that, they didn't want to over order and then not be able to move the books. So that's why we agreed that pre-orders would let me know about how many to order on the first run. And then once the first run is out, some of the funds from the Indiegogo will be used to print a second run. And hopefully from that, the book will just stay out. I'm hoping so.
Bad Dreams, what is that going to be about, this new book?
Original story, again, sort of tying in with what I'm supposed to be writing in the film. It's Freddy and his involvement with a new generation, his influence on them. But something else that I wanted to do is another part of the book at the end is a smaller section. And it's going to cover basically the explanations of a series of mysterious things that happened after Freddy's quote unquote disappearance. Because originally that's what the press was told. Freddy left town. He disappeared. At that time, they didn't know that he was the victim of a lynch mob that burned him to death. So after he went missing, quote unquote, strange things happened. There were some unexplained deaths that were in his similar style. There were other things that happened that made no sense. And then there were some divorces, some suicides, some disappearances, and some of the other things. One of my favorites is there's going to be a little section on Kirk Newton, who most people don't know by name. He had two sisters that were twins, Trina and Tracy. They were Freddy's victims towards the end of the book, Razor's Edge. They were the twin sisters, and he was their brother. Well, the stigma of what happened to his sisters sort of, followed him around, and he ended up being institutionalized for sleep disorders and depression, anxiety, insomnia. and all that, and he's being treated, but he finds himself strangely claiming that a man with razor fingers is after him in his dreams, and he ends up trying to keep himself from sleeping, so he removes his own eyelids with a straight razor. And he's mentioned in passing in Nightmare on Elm Street
Part
3
three.
when Dr. Gordon says, "We about a month ago we lost a kid to Fairview. I don't know where he got the razors, but he cut off his own eyelids to stay awake." So that is who that child is. So kind of just bridging the gap and getting people sort of excited and explaining exactly what in the world happened, because Springwood is just like it's infected by Freddy's influence, has just corrupted this whole town. So that's sort of another focus for that book. But generally, that's what it's about.
And I really like that you're doing that because as we talked last time, I'm a huge fan of the Nightmare on Elm Street series. And what I love that you did, especially with Razor's Edge, is you told the story leading up to the first film, right? And now with this new book, it's like a kind of a continuation of what happens after Razor's Edge, right? It's sort of like that continuation of after they decide they're good, the lynch mob, takes down Freddy. This is sort of the next sort of step in what's happened in Springfield. And I love that you've given this new breath to the series because I do feel like that's been missing. I love the films, but this before story and everything that led to it, it's very interesting to me.
I'm glad. It was really a big gamble for me because the reason I focused primarily with Razor's Edge on the story of his birth up through his murder is because, in my opinion, you can't touch greatness. The first Nightmare on Elm Street, that set the tone. Everyone knows what happened after he died, but no one really got a comprehensive look at what happened before all that. And he was human. I mean, he wasn't a great human, but he was human. And um, focusing on that kind of shows you a man slipping into psychopathy and his sanity slowly kind of, it's like part of it is like there's hints of unreliable narrator. It's like with the voices he hears when he's building the glove, these voices telling him to kill, do this to Underwood, do that. It's like, is he imagining this or is this really happening and we're just a party to it? Because I like that it confuses the reader because it makes you feel like you're losing your mind at parts. And that's sort of the thing with Springwood and with the Elm Street universe is nothing is as it seems. I mean, outside Springwood is this picture perfect town. I mean, you'd want to grow up or raise a family there. You'd have friends that lived in a neighborhood like that, or you'd go visit your grandparents or whatever. And on the outside, it's this idyllic, beautiful, picturesque place, but under the surface, it's rotten, it's dirty, it's infected, it's corrupted by this evil presence that happens to manifest itself in a form of a man. And then what he's able to do once he dies and crosses over and is given that power, it basically makes him every person's worst fear because we all have to sleep. And when you don't sleep, your health suffers. And certainly if you fall asleep in Springwood, your health is definitely going to suffer, but it's likely going to be the kind where you won't recover. So I like that it's an invasion. Freddy in the dreams. It's like the most truest form of just like, yeah, just like invasion. It's like dirty, nasty, taking of the innocence. The sleep is supposed to be the undisturbed thing, and now not even sleep is safe. So I didn't want to tell what Wes and the crew from the other films had already told. I wanted to tell what we were given bits and pieces of throughout the films, but no real backstory on like Freddy's mother, for circumstances surrounding his birth, how he ended up at Weston Hills, how he comes back to Weston Hills. And Weston Hills does show up in this new book. So Weston Hills is in there in some form. So, and there's passing references to incidents that happened in the film. I can give one thing away. There's a news article that one of the younger characters finds sort of on like a dark web kind of thing, because Springwood has tried to hide Freddy. I mean, they've tried to just make it like he didn't exist because they're ashamed. They became what they feared the most. He was a murderer, and in turn, they became murderers by doing what they did. vigilante justice is still vigilante. It's not legal. So, um, they find this article on the dark web and they talk about a young woman who's was killed at Weston Hills trying to help other patients. Uh, that were suffering from sleep disorders and such. And then, you got a kid in a wheelchair who's got bruises and blood all over him, but they don't know how because he's not supposed to be able to walk. So it's like those references.
When we're talking about Blake's Krazy Nightmare, when do you anticipate that you'll start filming the movie?
I anticipate we're going to start filming once the funding is gathered because, like I said, so much has already been done. We've already gotten half a dozen shooting locations nailed down. We've gotten all the principal cast and crew, director of photography, special effects, makeup, all that stuff. The assistant, producers, executive producer. So everything's so much has already been done, but we want to go into it ready to knock it out and work long days. And so we're wanting to do that once the funding has been gathered for the Indiegogo, because there are going to be different things. I can tell everyone watching that there's going to be some perks where you can be an executive producer, an associate producer, and get to work on a future project and starting at lower tiers, because that's something else. That's one thing I think that's overlooked when you're doing a crowdfunding thing is there's no such thing as too small of a donation. Everything helps. So even if it's just $25 or even $10, that's $10 closer to that goal. And there is strength in numbers. So even if it's all smaller donations, that so many of crowd-funded films are pushed over the top, exceed their goal because of the smaller perks. But there's also ultimate perks where you get to have like one-on-one conversation with me, come to set, visit, get copies of all the books and all this other kind of stuff. So there's posters and pins and badges and stickers, and oh my goodness, this this campaign is probably the most like comprehensive campaign I've ever been part of. So
one of the things that our viewers might not know if they didn't catch the other episode is that you actually own several pieces of memorabilia from the Nightmare films, right? And you mentioned earlier that you have something that's going to be in this film, which is a whole other piece. Can you talk about that a little?
Sure. So I have it's actually over here with me. I have several pieces from the other films, and then I have a piece that was custom made for this film, but will remind you of a piece from one of the original films. And I'm gonna put on some things right here, some gloves, because I don't handle any of this stuff barehanded because I was trained not to. The effects industry has taught me that if you want these props to last, you have to take care of them and do what you do. So let me see if I can position this just a little. I'm going to raise this camera up. Forgive the crudeness of this angle if you don't mind.
Oh, you're fine.
This prop actually is handmade, and it's very similar to the one Patricia Arquette's character fashioned in Nightmare 3. It is a popsicle stick house.
I love that so much.
And it's got lights in it, actually. Let's see if I can show you some of they flash. And David actually built this. He built this piece himself. He did not tell me he was a prop maker, but he built this piece. This is one of one, signed by him. And it actually has got, like here, it says guilty verdict, murder of wife. And there's lots of stuff that's related. It's got the doors, and it's partially unfinished, just like the one in Nightmare 3. So it's hollow on the inside, so you can kind of see inside of it here. It actually houses one of my other props. I keep this over it as like a facade, but it houses a screen-used glove underneath it, so which is actually over here too. So that's one of the props that's going to be used in the film, is this little popsicle house, which I thought he did a great job on it.
And when we talk about David, we're saying David Brandon. He going to be the director of the film?
He is the writer, the director, and one of the driving forces in the DarkHouse Entertainment company. He's paid his dues. He's been in films. He's produced music videos. He had a reality show for a time on like the History Channel or one of those channels, A&E, something like that. And he's been in the business a long time, and he's always loved the movies and stuff, and especially horror. So yeah, he's really a jack of all trades and a master too. He is responsible for me being in He Comes to Kill. Were it not for him, I would not have been involved with that film. So
Nightmare on Elm Street is such a big part of your life, whether it's your writing, watching the film, now being in a film that's, related to Nightmare on Elm Street. What keeps you going back and interested in this story? Because I feel like it's such a deep meaning for you.
You have hit the nail on the head. I mean, you can't get any more right. They have been such a huge part of my life. I discussed it on the last episode that we did together of the Merino show, where I talked about how I was raised and how that environment was kind of toxic. So I kind of felt like early on in my life that if I could lose myself in a movie for 60 minutes, 90 minutes, whatever, then I could not focus on what was going wrong and ruining and being ruined in my life, and focus on living sort of vicariously through someone else and being a part of their story. And I think that's why I love Nightmare on Elm Street so much, because the idea in itself stems from, like we discussed earlier, something very, very normal. We all need sleep. I mean, it's what you recharge your system. It gives you your energy to get through the day and be productive, do what you do. And when you don't have it, or you have very little of it, things kind of fall apart, and nothing kind of hits like it's supposed to. So, and then the idea of that character, that a scarred, burned man in a nasty, musty sweater with the glove. I mean, the weapon is so unique, and the look of Freddy is something that, I mean, you will probably find people that don't know what year the Titanic sank, but if you show them a picture of Freddy, they know who that is. So it's like this has become, and that's not to take away from a tragedy like the Titanic, but that's to show how pop culture, especially horror pop culture, has sort of infiltrated everyday life. I mean, we've had uh, there have been presidents, like Reagan mentioned, Nightmare on Elm Street during one of his speeches, and it's like it's become this thing outside of itself. Not to mention that it launched New Line and gave us such great other films like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and then now they've got the Conjuring and Lord of the Rings and all this other stuff. And it's like Freddie opened a lot of doors. He opened a lot of doors, and he kept a lot of people awake, but they they have benefited from this. I think all of us have, because Freddie is very much like a part of American culture, a part of world culture. I mean, I've seen fans come to see me from Canada, from Russia, from Africa, from Malaysia, and they love Freddie. They build gloves, or they do tattoos, or they have pictures, or they draw, and Freddie is such a prominent figure. It's like amazing to me that something so awful, like a disgusting child murderer like that, can bring so much positive into the world and like unite people together, especially in the horror community. It's fascinating, and it's something I'm very proud to be part of. And I know David and the Dark House crew and yourself and Helsing and so many others all across the world feel that same way.
Is there a character in any of the films that you felt that you identified with or related to in the Nightmare series?
Yeah, it's so hard. You can't really pick just one. I can probably give, a couple. First, I identify a lot with Jesse, Mark Patton's character from Nightmare 2, because growing up, I had that toxic household. Like, he's at odds with his father, and his mother doesn't understand him, and he the only person that really kind of understands him in his house is his sister, and then he has the girlfriend, and then he has the best friend, and all this stuff is happening, but he doesn't know who to trust except for those core people. He can't trust the adults, and that's sort of how I felt. I couldn't trust the adults in my household growing up because they hurt me, and it was all under the guise of, oh, if you just show them love and continue to be you, then one day they'll change and things won't be so awful. And all that was a passive way of just being willfully ignorant and just it's not, they don't change. The euphemism is what, a leopard doesn't change its spots. And I think that rang true in that situation. So certainly Jesse, he was one. I really, really related a lot to Carlos from Freddy's Dead because I have a hearing disability due to the toxic environment in my household. So when Freddy stuck that gigantic Q-tip in his ear, to me, that was the ultimate form of like just evil, was just preying on someone else's disability. It shows that Freddy also is a equal opportunity killer, as it were. He didn't discriminate. He's added people with disabilities, like Will Stanton from Nightmare 3, and then, of course, Sheila from Nightmare 4 with her asthma, and then Debbie with her fear of bugs. And he even preyed on an unborn child.
Now, I know you attend a lot of horror cons. Have you talked about the project with any people at the horror con circuit?
Yeah, I just did a show in Knoxville at a Mag Comic Expo, and I talked a little bit about it, had some posters, first edition posters, and most of the cast was there. So we talked with fans about it and everything, and they were really excited because a lot of them grew up with Nightmare on Elm Street. It's like this American institution. It's sort of like the thing that we all did growing up. I was surprised at the amount of fans that came up to the table that were female fans that were just like tattooed. Like I saw this one lady that came to the table and she was tattooed like to the nines with Freddy with his tongue wrapped around one of the blades, and her flesh ripping open, and there's a red and green striped pattern under her flesh, and all this other stuff. And she said that it influenced her to try to make movies and do artsy projects and kind of embrace that side of herself. So it's like Nightmare on Elm Street has sort of helped an entire generation kind of find themselves. And it continues to do that. And that's why I wanted to do this, is because it allows the mythology to continue. And we're bringing back a darker Freddy. DarkHouse was very explicit when I took the job. They said, Blake, what we're going to do is we're going to go back to the roots. I said, explain. They said, Nightmare on Elm Street 1 and 2, makeup. 1 and 2, makeup, especially number 2. I said, I like where you're going with this, that disgusting, wet, suppurating, pus-filled burn wounds, the hooked nose, the flesh that's pulled tight enough to just rip, and dark, disgusting. And they had me hooked. I said, where do I sign? Yeah, of course, I'll do it.